Hi everybody, it's Mr. Castleman here with another video. We're going to be looking at Chapter 5, Sections 7, 8, and 9. So this is the final video for guided reading and notes for Chapter 5, all about ancient Sumerians. So what you're going to need right now is your web browser pulled up to TCI Chapter or Lesson 5, Ancient Sumer, and then Section 7, the arts. So we're going to be reading Section 7. If you haven't already completed this and read all the other sections 1 through 6, you should do that first. Okay, let's read Section 7. Oh, and you're also going to need your ISN pages right here for Section 7, and you'll also need, boom, something to write with. Okay, Section 7, the arts. All civilizations have a highly developed culture, including the arts. Arts include creative forms of expression, such as painting, architecture, which means designing buildings, and music. There were many kinds of artists and artisans in ancient Sumer. Metal workers made objects like weapons and cups. They made decorative items such as mirrors and jewelry too. Architects designed temples and ziggurats. Music was another important art in Sumer. The Sumerians believed that music brought joy to gods and people alike. Musicians sang and played instruments during temple ceremonies. They wrote love songs and entertained guests at feasts. Sumerian musicians played a variety of instruments, including drums and pipes. One favorite was a small harp called a lyre. Lyres were wooden instruments made of a sound box and strings. That's kind of like a guitar or a violin. A wooden bar held the strings in place at the top. Lyre makers often decorated their instruments with precious stones and with carvings made of horn. These decorations show how much the Sumerians valued music. Okay, so we just read Section 7. Now we're going to do the interactive student notebook notes for Section 7. So have out Section 7 notes here. Pause the video if you need to open up your binder to this page. So, first question. Name 3 types of artists in Sumer and explain what each one did. 3 types of artists. Okay, so we learned about metal workers. So the metal workers were one type of artist. So metal workers did a lot of things. We're going to explain what they did. So they made objects like weapons, cups, and jewelry, like necklaces. So metalworkers made objects like weapons, cups, and jewelry. Okay, another artist. Another type of artist, let's see, architects. Architects design buildings like ziggurats. And remember, ziggurats were a type of temple, so a religious building. Musicians were another type of artists. So musicians played instruments and sang during ceremonies. So musicians played instruments and sang during ceremonies. Okay, the next question. Why was music an important art in Sumer? Why was music an important art in Sumer? Music was important, we read. Music was important because, well, let's think here. What did we learn? Well, the Sumerians believed that music brought joy to gods and people alike. See this line right here? So this tells us about that. The Sumerians believed that music brought joy to gods and people alike. So music was important because Sumerians believed it brought joy, so happiness, to gods and people. Okay, now we're not going to do this last question here, so we can move on. Now let's read section 8. Okay. Section 8 is titled Technology. All civilizations create new forms of technology. The Sumerians made several technological advances. The most important Sumerian invention was the wheel. The earliest examples of the wheel date back to 3500 BCE, so that's more than 5,000 years ago. Sumerian potters, or pottery makers, first used wheels as a surface for shaping clay into pots. Potter's wheels spun flat side up on an axle. That was the thing it spun on. The Sumerians discovered that a wheel that was flipped onto its edge could be rolled forward. They used this discovery to create wheeled carts for farmers and chariots for the army. They built the wheels by clamping pieces of wood together. It would be hard to discover a more powerful invention than the wheel. Before the wheel, people had to drag their goods on flat-bottom carts called sledges. The sledges often got stuck in mud, and they couldn't support heavy loads. Wheeled carts made it much easier to move goods over long distances. Oxen, which is a type of animal, kind of like a cow, could pull 3 times more weight on wheeled carts than on sledges. Another technological advance was the arch. Sumerian arches were inverted, that means upside down, U or V-shaped structures built above doorways. To build arches, the Sumerians stacked bricks made of clay and straw to rise from the walls in steps until they met in the center. Arches added strength and beauty to Sumerian buildings. They became a common feature of temple entrances and upper-class homes. Some historians say that the arch is the Sumerians' greatest architectural achievement. Okay, now let's do the notes for section 8 here. So the question says, in the flowchart below, draw and label pictures to show what life was like in Sumer before and after the invention of the wheel. Now, I'm not going to draw this for you, so I want you to come up with your own drawing, but I will take some notes. Before the wheel, Sumerians pulled stuff on sledges. Which were basically flat-bottom carts. Flat-bottomed carts. I'm going to add a second note here that you couldn't pull that much weight. Couldn't pull that much weight. Now remember, you can always pause this video if you need to slow down and really take some notes. Okay, so after the wheel, you could pull a lot more weight on wheeled carts. So after the wheel, wheeled carts made it easier. Wheeled carts made it easier to pull heavier loads. Also, after the wheel, people invented chariots, which are pulled by horses. Okay, now the next question says to draw and label a picture of a Sumerian arch. Explain why it was an important technological advance. Now, an arch kind of looks like this. Kind of looks like a U. Right? We can imagine that this is kind of like a doorway. Right? Imagine this is a door right here. It's got a little handle. The arch is this curved section right here. See how it curves over? That's what an arch looks like. And this would have been made of bricks. So we can draw some bricks like this. There are our beautiful bricks making up our arch there. All right, now we got to explain why the arch was an important technological advance. Now this is a good question. Arches were important. Arches were important because they made buildings stronger and more beautiful. Okay, we're going to skip the next question. Now I'm going to flip over my notes to section 9, which is the last section that we're going to read today. So I'm going to go up to section 9 here. Section 9 is titled Writing. A final characteristic of civilizations is a highly developed written language. The Sumerians created a written language called cuneiform. This name comes from the Latin word for wedge. The Sumerians used a wedge-shaped stylus, that was a sharp-pointed tool, to etch their writing in clay tablets. So that's how they wrote. Sumerians developed cuneiform around 2400 BCE. That's more than 4,000 years ago. The earliest examples of cuneiform show that it was used to record information about the goods people exchanged with one another. At first, cuneiform writing may have contained as many as 2,000 symbols to stand for ideas and sounds. Over time, this number was reduced to about 700. Still, that's almost like having 700 different letters in your alphabet. Cuneiform was based on an earlier, simpler form of writing that used pictographs. Let's click this word here and learn what pictographs means. So pictographs is a symbol that stands for an object. Pictographs are symbols that stand for real objects, such as a snake or water. Scribes used a sharpened reed to draw the symbols on wet clay. When the clay dried, the marks became a permanent record. Okay, let's do the notes for section 9. So on the right-hand side here, we can see that the question asks, in the flowchart below, explain the development of writing in Sumer from pictographs to cuneiform. Okay, so we can write a little bit about pictographs here. So pictographs were a form of writing, We can also write that pictographs are symbols that stand for real objects. I'm going to sneeze again. Oh, excuse me. So symbols stand for real objects with pictographs. So for example, the symbol for snake might look like kind of like an S. That could be the symbol for snake. Or the symbol for sun could look like something like this. All right, cuneiform is a different kind of writing. It is a form of writing, so we'll write that in. It's a form of writing. There were over 700 symbols used by the Sumerians. And it was first used to record information about goods being exchanged. So it's a form of writing with over 700 symbols, first used to record information about goods being exchanged. Okay, final question here, because we're not gonna do the last question. We can cross this out. So the last question: why do you think cuneiform was a better method of communication than pictographs? Now let's think for a second. With pictographs, you have to come up with like a symbol that stands for an actual physical object. With cuneiform, you didn't have to do that. So cuneiform was a better method of communication. Because the Sumerians could write more detailed information. In other words, cuneiform allowed them to be more specific. Okay, you've gotten through section 9, the last section in this chapter. Good job. If you need to go back, you can pause the video, you can rewind, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.